Ninjas, I'm Strydent, and welcome to another video. Today we're talking about a subject that I actually covered a decade ago, and it seems that some of what I said has come to pass in a good way, but most of what I was asking for to change has only gotten worse. The whole identity political sphere has infected everything. We've seen all the DEI fallout, and we've seen this weird shift where instead of just making cool stories with characters that come from different backgrounds, people keep on crying out, we need more, insert whatever representation. Now, when it comes to certain groups, black folks, the particular representation is always one particular way. You always got to be hood or hood adjacent, You always got to be selling drugs. You always got to be, wearing one of the approved haircuts. You always have to wear a certain approved style of clothing. You just can't be unique and be a black character. But then there's the bigger problem, because you see it with other groups too. Other groups spend a lot of time demanding that they are represented the way that the loudest voices want to be represented in everything. And to me, that's just the reason why you don't just get the representation. It's why people ignore those characters, those folks, in some cases. When you do see it, though, in the modern era, it's always like kind of a Mary Sue or Gary Stu kind of thing, where it's too much in the direction, of positivity, to the point where it just seems stupid. Because you watch a story for the ups and downs, the peaks and valleys. You don't watch a story to see everything is awesome all the time, no problems, no nothing. Because if that's the case, what are they overcoming? Why are we watching their story if they have nothing to overcome? You know what I'm saying? Like, that doesn't make any sense. I've noticed this especially with modern day, like, boss bitch mentality stories, We've all noticed it. The Force Awakens, that whole new trilogy, same shit. But I saw this video from a cat named Mugen Lord. I've seen him around. You can't forget a guy with hair like that. And he points out this really specific issue that it pertains to black creators. It doesn't matter what you do. It could be music. It could be fine art. It could be comics. It could be just about anything. And there is this vocal minority that tries to tell you that what you're doing as a black person or a person with brown skin, it's not black enough. As if you are their personal artist, their personal designer, creator, whatever, as if the brown people are a monolith. And you hear that phrase a lot, but then you notice that there is a monolithic philosophy that comes from these folks. They're not creative enough to do it themselves. They sit on the sidelines and they comment on everything. They spew a lot of ignorance in their rhetoric, and they don't really support anything worth supporting. If a dope boy makes an album, you'll buy that shit and you'll bump that shit from now till the end of time. But if a regular, non-gang affiliated, non-weed selling, drug dealing, whatever individual makes a story that has worthwhile, good characters in it, you won't read it. And I know this from personal experience. I made a book back in the early 2000s. It was early to mid 2000s, called War of the Gods. If you go back and you look at some of my old videos, you can actually see ads for it. The goal with this book was to make a superhero book that was a love letter to the old comics that I grew up reading in the 80s and the 90s, and to have characters of various backgrounds ethnically, and not make that the focus of their story. Because one of the problems that I see with writers that are not, as good is that they can't write people of varying ethnic backgrounds without making that be their defining detail. You see it now, the spicy Latina. Like, are you fucking kidding me? That's it? That's the only thing they can be? It's just like when Asian people would complain about always being ninjas or something like that, even though martial arts is part of like China China specifically. It's part of their culture. You know what I mean? Like it has origins in their culture, I guess I should say. And so for Chinese martial artists, it's a big deal and they're proud to wear that on their chest. But for the rest of China, they don't really care about that. There's people in China that don't care about the martial arts background. So, they hate that. Same with Japan. Some people, especially people involved in the martial arts, they love Bushido and all of that shit. But for the average person, they don't give a fuck because they do what they want to do that doesn't have anything to do with that. So you're putting them in a box based on one detail. The black person, they always got to be cool. They always got to be like super performative in a way that's not natural. And it comes across as corny to the rest of us who don't focus our whole life on trying to fit whatever the black stereotype is that was given to us by other groups. But now you have this entitlement where it's like anything you make, they will come out of the woodwork and tell you you have to meet their standard. And I'm like, fuck no, fuck you. You're not going to buy the book anyway. You don't read comics. Why do I need to listen to you? When I was in high school and I was building these characters, I remember all the shit I got for being the nerdy comic book kid. And by nerdy comic book kid, I didn't dress like the hip hop kids. I used to skate. So I hung out with all the skater dudes and girls. I wasn't one of those pimple-faced, hiding in my room away from everybody else. No, I had friends, guys and girls. I had girlfriends and stuff. They just weren't the cool kids in my school. And my school was predominantly a ton of drug dealers, ton of hoes. I'm not going to lie. I mean, 8th grade pregnancies, just being honest. And I wasn't interested in all that shit. I was actually doing age-appropriate things at the age-appropriate time. Whereas a lot of them were getting pregnant. They were having all kinds of different relations. Most of the girls had been with most of the so-called cool guys that sold drugs and had money and shit like that. I wasn't interested in that. And I get it. That's the reality for some people, but it doesn't have to be. Some people go out of their way to choose that and make that choice. I was like, I'm going to stay and learn how to draw and learn how to fight. I did martial arts. I skateboarded and I drew comics. I was doing all the age appropriate stuff. But I did this book. I put it out. I did ads here on YouTube. I got okay kind of sales, but the majority of my sales came from outside of the US. So then I was kind of convinced to put the book on Line Webtoon. Stan Lee was having some contest about superhero comics, and friends and people who knew I drew comics were like, yo, you should put this up there. I put it up there. I didn't win. But the weird thing that happened was Line Webtoon is a Korean website. Apparently most Korean comic book fans like to read their books on the go, more so than what we see, at least back then, it was more so than what we were seeing with American comic book fans. So you could read those books in a format where it just scrolls forever. And so I know now most people are familiar with Webtoon because there's been quite a few Webtoons that have become anime since the days when I did this. This was in 2020 or 21, maybe even 2019. It's been a while, but we've seen a couple like God of High School and Tower of, I think it's called Tower of God. I can't remember. It's been so long since I looked at that stuff. But they all went on to be fairly infamous or famous, and people know what I'm talking about. What I ended up seeing was that the Korean folks that came across my book gave me props for the artwork that was in it. They liked the story and they were like, you should keep going. And at first I was like, yeah, okay, I'll keep going. But then I was like, I put the link to the actual book, the physical book, and no one was buying it. So that discouraged me because technically, being on Line Webtoon, I was breaking the books up digitally into chapters. There's 30 pages in each book, so I would have like, I think a group of 6 to 10 pages, for each chapter. And I was giving it to them in bites, small bites. And it felt kind of shitty because here I am putting my heart and soul into this book, and no one's buying it. People are consuming it when I put it up there for free, but no one's buying it. No one's sharing it. The stuff that you see with other books that don't have art to the level of what I was putting out there, they get attention and they get shared and they get everything. But the original idea that's drawn better or as good as the best drawn or close to as good as some of the better drawn books out there, it's not getting any attention because everything is original. And the style is in between American comics and manga. Then, when you come back to the US side, I had people at conventions, black folks, and it's the specific type of black folk that I'm talking about that got to be loud, got to be ignorant, you only watch Dragon Ball Z or whatever the popular anime is, so you think you have knowledge on those characters. Most of them love the Hulk, but never read a Hulk comic. And you want to tell us about comics. And it's like, you see them all over Twitter. Nowadays, you guys call them tourists. They always had something to say. Why do you make your characters look like this? Is this a black comic? No. Why does it have to be a black comic? Why can't it be a comic that happens to have some characters that are black? It's frustrating because it's like closed-minded people are serving as the voice of the whole, but the whole is made up of several different types of people. The rest of us don't run around and yell from the rooftops about everything, but you also have a huge chunk of all of us that don't support what we do, yet this stupid argument keeps on persisting. And again, it's perpetuated by like the fucking muggles, the fucking, the tourists. And then they have responses like, if you don't like what they're doing, make your own. Okay, fine. So then we make our own, like I did, and then you don't buy it. And it's not because it's corny. When you look, the goal with War of the Gods, for instance, was to make cool looking superheroes that look like they could fit in Marvel or DC. And they could be white under there if they want. If someone wanted to write a story where down the road someone else inherits these powers and wears Strident's costume, the guy under the suit could be white. The bottom line is that the costume looks cool enough that it could fit in any of the boxes without necessarily. You could put a woman under that suit. I mean, obviously her body would be different, but the coolness of the costume transcends the race of the wearer. It's almost like Garo for my tokusatsu heads out there. All the users of Garo have been different ages, and they've been slightly different sizes, but they've all been men, right? You don't have to be Japanese to wear the Garo suit. You just have to be a high-level Makai Knight. So think of it in that context. And that was the goal. And people have told me just from looking at him that they thought he was a badass. They were like, holy shit. They liked it. And I was like, okay, cool. I remember being at a Comic-Con where they were telling me about characters they wanted to see him go up against, because in the first issue, or second issue, you get to see him kind of fight, real quickly. He like blocks a bunch of bullets with his sword, like spinning his sword. and he dispatches a bunch of criminals, in the middle of a robbery. And then later on, you see him cut a bullet in half with a sword that because he creates swords out of these gauntlets that he has. He can create these liquid metal orbs that he can shape into whatever he wants. And he creates like a very generic blade, chops the sword in half to block a bullet. I mean, chops the bullet in half to block it from hitting one of his friends, and then turns around, makes one long, like a broadsword, then multiplies that into like, I don't know, 8 more, and then shoots them at the enemy. And you just see him walking through the enemy while the swords are flying through, impaling all these guys. And people were like, yo, this is fucking dope, whatever. Okay, if it's fucking dope, buy the book. You know what I mean? That's just how it needs to go. But that's not what happens. And I think you guys can see just by looking at what I've posted already that in my case, I'm trying to defy stereotypes with my main characters. And if you look at the thugs and stuff, because there is a, what's the word I'm looking for? Escalation. A level of escalation that happens in this book where it starts out street level and then becomes insane. Because characters like Strydent are typically street level characters. And so with his story and the others, because this is a ensemble book, you see what they go through, but then when you add more elements to the story, it starts to grow and expand and move out of the one setting into a bigger setting because all the other characters' stuff is kind of being introduced into the story. But people would give all kinds of criticisms and stuff like that, but they wouldn't buy the book. I mean, I had sales, don't get me wrong. The majority of my sales came from Europe. And strangely enough, New Zealand, parts of New Zealand. I was surprised. I was extremely surprised. I had a lot of sales in Russia, like the Ukraine area. I had a lot of sales in parts of France. Strange, you know what I mean? And people told me they dug what was going on. It's just that the sales weren't big enough for me. It wasn't equal enough to what I would need to make the jump to just doing this and not my day job. But all throughout that time, I was getting told, this character, I can't tell he's black. What do you mean you can't tell he's black? It's a black and white comic. Dude's got dark skin, thick lips, all those things. And there's times where I don't go into that huge of detail. You've watched manga. We don't have to detail everything from every angle. Sometimes you simplify stuff and characters will have a lion for a mouth, But there's all these criticisms of what they want you to do. And it's not even a positive thing. It's a control thing, as we've seen in recent years. You keep telling me to do this, to do this, to do this. You weren't going to buy it anyway. And you know that. So why waste my time? The Mugen Lord situation is extremely similar to that. He's being told that his characters don't look black, but they're anime characters that have dark skin. So clearly in the context of the manga that he's making, they're black. It's that simple. Before I continue, let me not forget that there are other people who do this. You see it a lot with the LGBTQ community when it comes to everything. Every day there's a new something added to their midst, and they expect everyone else to study up and keep adding shit to their midst and then putting it in our books. They also expect us to allow for poor writers, writers with no skills, to just put that moniker, that extra piece, onto characters previously presented as straight, and everybody's supposed to just be like, oh, how stunning and brave, it's awesome, it's everything. It's not awesome because you're disrespecting someone else's creation and the legacy of their creation. It's just that simple. Make up characters that fit what you want them to fit. Be nice so that people don't have a negative stigma attached to your particular group of whatever you claim. it's not everybody's responsibility to cater to you. You know, you have to be able to be a decent enough person, you know, or decent enough people that folks want to be involved, you know? So it's one of those things, you know? It's it's kind of annoying when you think about it. But they do this just as bad as maybe even worse. But I don't engage with all of this as much because, you know, I stick to myself. You know, I don't like to get into the groups and all that stuff because there's too many dynamics going on, and I'm not a people person to begin with. So I'm not going to sit here and validate everybody's everything every time I speak. Fuck that. That's just not how it goes. Now, don't get me wrong. When good people show up and don't disrespect you, don't demand ridiculous things of you before they've put in the time to actually become your homeboy or your homegirl or whatever, I don't have a problem with them. Most of my friends, we've been friends since we were little kids, and others, we've been friends for over a decade. I'm not the type of person who I just throw away friends. You know what I mean? Many of my friends I consider my family because I don't have a family. You know, I mean, I have my own family that I made, but I don't have an extended family. You know, my family was so dysfunctional that there was no way we were all gonna make it and be together. So, you know, I take my friends, I take friendship and the concept of that seriously, but I won't be told, you know, how I'm supposed to do everything before we've ever put in any time to develop a friendship, you know, let alone when I'm making up something, have somebody from some group claiming that I'm doing something because of their own perspective, and I'm supposed to now change my story and my approach based on what they told me. Fuck that. People write stories, you know? So the Mugen Lord situation is exactly what I'm saying. You see this character up there, there's a tweet there, and it says, "You specifically trying your hardest not to give her any black features. It's definitely a choice." Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, you've never watched an anime ever in your life. And he gets bombarded with this shit because they all expect everything to be put in there. Like, you have to represent everything black if you happen to be black and you create stuff. That's bullshit. You know, like, everybody can't represent everything all the time. You know? It's complete bullshit that somehow identity politics has turned people into this, where they feel the need to police how you create things because they perceive X, Y, and Z to be black. You know, these are black traits. And X, Y, and Z are non-black traits. Or if you don't put those particular things on them, they're not, like, get the fuck out of here. One size does not fit everybody. I like when I see anime and manga with varying styles, you know, where the characters have varying differences so that you don't get bored. A lot of anime is handled the same way. You see, like, from Japan, there's a color concept issue with having this skin tone that you see those two characters have there and the clothes that they'll put on them and the hair that they'll give them. They follow the generic color wheel type shit where, for instance, Elena, because her skin is roughly around there, her hair has to be white, kind of like Storm. And it's white with like a lavender shadows to it. It looks pretty, don't get me wrong, but why can't you experiment? And if you look back, Akuma has a skin with, a palette. I can't remember what, it might be Player 2, huh? And Shin Akuma. Actually, regular Akuma had it first, and then Shin Akuma, that's the default. And they did the same thing with Shin Rugal. They did it in Samurai Showdown with, was it Musashi? Whoever it was that they turned, it's like a dark Haomaru. I think he has white hair and purplish skin. I might be wrong. It might be brown with like purple shadows, but you see it often. What was that guy's name from uh, Garu Mark of the Wolves? Grant, I think was his name. He's got it. Tizak. I don't know what color his hair is, but he's got white on his body because he has brown skin. You see it all throughout anime, and it's frustrating because it's easy to point out the black characters because of this. Killer B has blonde hair instead of white hair. He's still in the ballpark of what I'm talking about. You look at these characters and you're like, wow, they don't look like they're following the generic Japanese uh, color concept formula. Instead, they look like they could be people that you see all across the board. You had a similar problem with black cosplayers. They were being told that they could only cosplay certain characters because of their skin tone. Honestly, I don't understand why you would want to cosplay a character that you don't look like, because the whole point is for you to look like the character. But that's a whole story for someone else. I'm not getting into that shit. You should have the freedom like we did when we were kids. All of us wanted to be Batman or Wolverine or Magneto or something. None of us in my neighborhood, very few were white. And we all pretended to be any and everybody. Spider-Man, it didn't matter. Because that's the kind of the point of the characters. You as a reader, you are connecting to what the character does and who they are, not what they look like. You know what I mean? Past the costume. It's more about their personality, their values, and the struggles that they go through. You can relate to those things, and that's what hooks you. I'm sure if people read this book, they will see characters go through certain things that will be like, oh shit, I remember going through something like that, or I always felt bad for people who went through something like this, or it's a trope that you like that you saw in another story that's here in this one, and you love it, so you go along with it. There's so many ways for you to relate to a character and enjoy it without all the bullshit. So sitting here acting like there is a one size monolithic, one size fits all black stereotype you can use for all black characters is dumb. All black people in America don't even act the same. They don't believe in the same shit. They don't even dress the same. They don't come from the same parts of the world. We have ancestry in the same part, but we don't necessarily come from that part of the world. So listening to some low IQ hood boogers idea of what you're supposed to do, and they're not even creative enough to be in the same realm as you, no. There has to come a time where constructive criticism wins, and not this bullshit performative, I'm smarter than you because I'm louder than you. Fuck that shit. Fuck that. I've had people say to me in my comment section that, oh, I could do without all as if my using profanity takes away from the very specific points that I make. I've had very deep discussions with a whole bunch of people. Shit, my homeboy, I consider him a brother from another mother, Bodie. We have gone back and forth on so many things. So many things. Deep conversations about, the nature of, life and where we're going, and, not being too serious, as well as just how crazy the world is getting in general. We've disagreed on shit. The Batman. I hate the shit. I hate that fucking movie. He loved it. And we butt heads a ton, and I was like, dude, okay, enough. I'm done. I don't want to fight over this anymore. I'm done. We weren't fighting, but I don't want to go back and forth anymore. And we laughed. He laughed. He realized that, for me, the discourse didn't make sense. And for him, everything that people were praising it about, he saw it. And I said, yeah, nah, I just don't. And we're still brothers. We're still great friends. Same thing with me and ODC. We don't like everything exactly the same, but we like a lot of stuff. But we recognize when a character's cool. ODC's favorite Joe is Stalker. My favorite Joe is Flint. It's between Flint and Beachhead. And neither of them are black. It's not the color that makes me like the character, it's the character, you know? Um, but the color is not a barrier. And that's what I'm getting at. Neither is the sex of the character either. That's not a a barrier for me. Lady J is still the bomb to me. The Baroness is still the bomb to me. Um, what's her name? I was about to say Jade. What is her name? Jinx is still the bomb to me. They're just cool characters. I don't care that one's Asian and one's this and I don't give a fuck. The redo of Shooter that they did for Classifieds as a chick, the bomb. I love it. I don't care that she's black. She's just cool. You could take that exact design, make her Hispanic. She still will be the bomb to me because the race plays the least part in why I like the character. If you run around looking at these characters and you only support based on the color of the skin of the people involved, you are doing yourself and artists all over a disservice. And I would say to you, Mugen Lord, fuck them. If they love what you do, they will back it. It's just that simple. Don't listen to people and expect that what they say is what they're going to do. Watch what they do. A lot of people talk a lot of shit, but as soon as you start learning that you're going to hear a lot of performative bullshit online and that all you need to do is go where the people do what they say they're going to do, it's like what they say in the red pill space, that you should go where you're appreciated, not where you're tolerated. Apply that to this and you'll be fine. He saw that after his video, he had a huge increase in sales coming out of Japan. They don't look like him. They just like good stories. That's all it boils down to, and good art. And Shabibit, I think is her name. Their name, I don't know if it's a woman or a man that's the artist. I think he said her. But she draws awesome, they draw awesome characters, in a very familiar style that most audiences, especially younger audiences, will be able to get behind. Don't worry about the whole colorism bullshit. It's nonsense, and it's an American problem that it permeates through everything now. Because a couple people who are really smart and really devious, they understand how to control the masses, and they found another way to separate us based on something dumb that you don't really have a control over. You're black because your ancestry is black. That's it. Your parents are black. It's all genetic. It doesn't really make you better or worse than anybody else. Now, if you follow certain stereotypes and you follow, certain philosophies of life, you're either going to do worse or better things, But if you keep looking at characters and, you can't get into it unless you see yourself, get the fuck out of here. That's stupid. Now, I know I brought up this years ago, and what I guess the point was as I'm raising my kids, I realized that when you look at the palette of characters, the palette of colors of all these characters in our toys, things like Lego, et cetera, you only had a certain few things or colors being used. And whenever people were black, they'd either get lightened up to be like these two characters, or they would be super, super dark to the point where it was almost like they were kind of making fun of the people they were representing. Very rarely did I see it actually fit the way that you have the rainbow or the spectrum of browns, And it got annoying. And then also the stories they would give us used to be annoying, but now it's not like that because identity politics is the way now for a lot of people. I don't like that that's a thing, the identity politics, but I do like the fact that in the midst of all this, you're seeing a lot more people take the jump to try to put out what they want to put out. Even if they're whack, they're putting out, because there was a guy who was challenging Mugen Lord. I'm not even going to put his stuff up on my screen because, fuck that. And he had the typical generic stories, the typical generic looking characters. I think it was called like the HBC universe. It's not, no, You got to do more than find a catchy thing. But he might be prospering. I don't know. But, call a spade, Just because you put Iron Man in like HBCU colors doesn't mean you did something, And, you know, if they're being honest, you know that that shit's not selling. Like, you know that poorly animated trailer, that really poorly designed character amidst a whole bunch of other poorly designed characters is not selling. And if it's selling to a very specific group of people who are probably muggles and what do I call them? Tourists, as you guys call them. And they don't really know much about comics, and they just assume black rip-off character equals great. I mean, there is a market for it. You see it all the time. Every convention I've ever been to, I always see black Nightwing, black Terry McGinnis, black Bruce Wayne, black Casey Jones with dreadlocks. I mean, you're ripping someone else off. And if they rip you off, you're going to try to sue them. Why rip them off when you could just spend the extra time and create original characters? It's not that hard once you know what you're doing. Just take the time, learn all the tricks of the trade, or as many of them as you can, and apply them to your work, like he did. It's that simple. Anyway, I've talked for a long enough time. I would love to go into detail about this with, you know, other people and just discuss it and just talk about our experience with that. So, you know, Mugen Lord, if you ever want to just chat, and we could do an Off Our Brains or something, or we could just do a podcast on your channel if you want, and we could talk about this stuff. Because it is something that has plagued many of us for a long time. I remember playing Street Fighter, and I chose Dudley. And a couple kids that I was in school with were like, they couldn't tell that Dudley was black. And I'm like, what? So because he's not screaming the N-word all day long, and because he's got a British accent, you didn't know there's Brits there's black Brits? Like, what's going on? He's based on an actual British boxer that's black, very black. But he talks just like him. He can slip up, and he does, and he corrects himself comically because the gentleman thing is his shtick. But it's like you guys have such a closed view of the world that like everything has to fit in this very narrow world view in order for you to clock it as what it is or what you would like it to be. And this is bullshit. Like, fuck that. Don't, for anyone, this is for anyone. I mean, I did specify to Mugen Lord, but for anyone trying to make something unique, something new, a comic, toy line, a cartoon, or whatever, do your thing and don't be constrained to racial constraints. Fuck that. You'll get so much farther because black folks are not the majority in the world. I mean, it's from a business perspective, you want to reach as many people as you can. So just make a good story. You can make your main character black. No one's going to be, only the idiots are going to complain about that stuff. Make your main character black if you want. Make a couple of the main characters black if you want, but tell a good fucking story. That's the point. You see that Marvel is failing right now because they've been telling shit stories. Spider Noir, the series, was actually pretty good considering all the changes they made to the, you know, from the source material, but it's one of the better things they've done in recent years. Same thing with Punisher, One Last Kill. But that's because the people behind those things actually understood the characters they were dealing with. They understood motivations and changes and things that would inspire a good story. And they stuck to their guns and made a good story. So even with the changes, it worked. You could do the same thing. That's it for me. You guys have been great. Peace outside.